Welcome to From X to Z, the show that believes you never age out of learning about the world around you. Featuring social media maven Danielle and Mervyn Dinnen, the analyst who puts the X in expert. They're here to talk all things jobs, HR, and trends. So mind the generational gap. This is From X to Z, only on the Purple Acorn Network.
Welcome back, everyone, to your favorite intergenerational podcast, From X to Z. I'm here with Mervyn Dinnen. It is a new week. It is a beautiful week in New York City. And Mervyn, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Danielle. It's a beautiful week in London.
Oh, lovely.
The sun has been shining. The sky has been blue. It's spring is almost here.
Spring is, I'm so ready for it. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm really pale. And when I'm really pale, I don't feel like myself. So I'm very excited that I will be in Vegas pretty soon. Not like I'm going to be suntanning. I will be at Transform. Um, but if you're going to be at Transform, I think this episode will be out by the time, or even before we leave, or maybe in time for Transform. So if you're going and you're listening, please say what's up. Hit me up on LinkedIn DMs. And I think we're just going to get right into it today.
Yep.
Does that sound good? All right, let's do it. So today we're talking about a Fortune article. The title is pretty crazy. Gen Z are over having their work ethic questioned. Quote, most boomers don't know what it's like to work 40 plus hours a week and still not be able to afford a house. Oh yeah. So this one really strikes a chord with me. I know last episode we touched a little bit about, the fact that it's so expensive to be buying a house, the cost of living increasing in the cost of, and the average salary is not increasing at the same rate. Mervyn, what are your thoughts on this generalization that we often hear, Gen Z being lazy and entitled? Like, is that something that you hear often, and is it something that you have to dispel for older generations?
It most definitely is. I think there is an element that sees it as lazy and entitled. I mean, the thing that comes up a lot, and unfortunately, I won't be making Transform this year,
Yeah.
but I was at a tech expo in Holland last week, and I was actually ran a session around kind of attracting and retaining Gen Z. And yeah, it did come up a few times from people saying that they don't get the feeling that Gen Z are really feel part of the business. They don't feel they don't know how to engage them. And I was able to kind of talk about one or two of the things we've talked about in previous chats. But I think it is there, and definitely at management level in organizations, from the conversations I have, there is this almost, I see this generation differently. Some of it is because, as I think I said to you in a previous episode, when I was your age, nobody could care less what I thought about anything or what I wanted.
Yeah.
Out of work. I was just told to, a good old fashioned English expression, put up and shut up. Basically, just deal with it and carry on. And so I think I agree. I think for older or more experienced generations, having younger workers with a real voice and stake and agency in what they do, how they do it, where and when they work, I think is difficult. I think they find it difficult to actually factor that into their management style.
I think one of the really interesting things to me is, and I talk about this a lot, is the general fact that we have access to so much information, and especially through social media. So we're a generation that has grown up in this digital age. And because of that, we've now seen millennials who are, right ahead of us sort of enter the workplace, mature in the workplace. And still, I just read an article, 81% of millennials don't believe that they have enough money to go through a midlife crisis. So like that's just it's like a funny stat, right? Because it's like, oh,
Yeah.
like they don't have the money to buy some random like crazy car or go on some crazy trip. But what that actually tells us is that they don't have freedom.
Mm.
And that is exactly what Gen Z wants. They want to be able to have their freedom, to be able to travel the world and do the things that they want to do, invest in the things that they want to do, and have experiences, because otherwise, why are we here and what are we doing? And I think that there's this general misunderstanding that happens between generations. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like the older generations see this as, oh, well, they don't want to work hard. But realistically, we're seeing millennials having worked hard, it not paying off. And therefore, we're choosing a different way.
Yes, no, I would agree with you that when I talk to social friends and say about the chats I have about this, they say, "Yeah, we've got someone at work. We've got a couple of these. Well, all they do is stare at their phones all day long, doing
Yeah,
messages. They're not. No one's working. No one's doing anything. They just can't wait to leave." Um, and I said, "No, it's not like that. It's not like that. It's just because it takes them probably 5 minutes to do something on their phone. You do in 5 seconds, kind of thing." Um, but I think that it's, as I said earlier about the quaint old expression, put up and shut up. I think that at the management levels, you have people who didn't, at your age in their career, they weren't interested in going out there and exploring the world and having this work-life balance that could enable them to live a different kind of life and work when they wanted to work and enjoy themselves and when they wanted to enjoy themselves. It was very much I think I said on the last episode or the one before that when I started work, it was very much 9:30 to 5:30, and nobody really expected you to do much more. But I was at the very much the tail end of that, because
right,
during my formative years, yeah, it was how many hours you put in, how long you were there. The thought, about 6:15, 6:30 in the evening, you'd go home and people would look at their watch, say part timer. Um, and that's the kind of, you had to be seen to be there, but you couldn't be seen to be there, kind of doing not very much. You had to work, you had to be seen to be working. And that could be anything, sending memos or kind of, finishing reports and leaving them on someone else's desk to show how hard you worked.
right,
But that was the only way you could get on. And to be able to get to that lifestyle that, as we've said, I think in the last episode, it's very difficult for Gen Z to get to now, about home, family, that structure. To get to that, you had to put in heavy hours. I mean, I watched my dad, who had his own accountancy practice, effectively work 7 days a week. Um, because he would always, even on a weekend, go into the office because he had letters to write, he had someone's tax return to look through, he had something to do that he hadn't completed the day
mhm,
before. And so I think that you've seen, or I've seen, being the older generation here, this kind of, people who work, life was just about work effectively, because that's the only way you were able to get money to do other
right,
things. And then, to the other way where, well, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get a stake in the business. We're just, we just want to do stuff that interests us, and we want to travel, and we want to do all different things. Um, and because, no one's going to give us that kind of, I say, the stake in the business, that career trajectory. And even if they did, we probably wouldn't want it,
right.
because we've seen the parental, I suppose the next generation up, definitely towards X and boomers, kind of, almost give up their personal lives and their kind of, travel and their kind of, everything like that they want to do, give it up to work all hours.
There's a lot of sacrifice that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to something that you said earlier, which is the fact of your dad going in on the weekends and choosing to work more. What's fascinating to me is that back then it was likely viewed as, well, that's a personal choice, right? It's like, oh, well, you want to make more money, so then okay, put in more hours, do what you have to do. But it doesn't seem, and correct me if I'm wrong, like it was a reflection on the entire generation of people, if they wanted, or if that was a set expectation then for the rest of that generation of people. Whereas I think now the expectation is that we're going to put in more hours than required in our contracts, in our 9 to 5 contracts, because that's the expectation, that's the societal norm. But when Gen Z rejects that norm, it then is reflected as, well, then they're being lazy, or they're not a hard worker, or they aren't as motivated, or whatever other thing people have to say about us. But I find it really incredibly fascinating that when one person decides, and this is why I do a lot of the work that I do, is like dispelling these stereotypes. Like when one person decides to do something one way, like, okay, I'm going to get my work done, but I'm going to do it in the required like 9 to 5, or maybe I'm going to do it, 9 to 3, go home, take a break, and then do more work at night, that they're viewed as like not working hard. I think that that's really effed, to say the
I
least.
think, yeah, I mean, I think that the work ethic I was talking about, obviously a generation above me, wasn't so much, because I want to make more money. I think it was very much, and I'm going back historically, post Second World War kind of economic recessions and things. I think it was seen as, what what adults did to I suppose create a family, build a home, raise a family, and it took a lot of effort, and they needed to be seen to put in the hours. I mean, as I said, when I referenced it a few minutes ago when I started, it was kind of like, nobody really expected me as a junior to do a lot more than my contracted hours. But within about 3-4 years, I was working in a business where if you went home at 7 o'clock, it was you're a part timer. And the only way to get on in the business, which was the only way to get on in life effectively, to get more senior promotion, more money, as we were saying before about with property and stuff. The only way to do it was be seen to put in the hours. And I spent 6-7 months working in one company. It was quite a big company. It's now one of the big four accountancy firms. It got soaked up into one of them. But I was sharing an office with two managers who literally were in at 7:30 in the morning. These were guys in their early to mid 30s at the time, in at 7:30 in the morning and there until 7:30 at night at least, because that's what they had to do. Not just to be seen. It wasn't a case, of being seen. It was a case of doing as much work as they could for the business to become senior management, to become partnership, to
Right.
become those kind of stake. Whereas I personally, I've always had a bit of the Z about me, even before anybody knew what it was. I wasn't that interested in that. But I mean, in the main, I can see where it comes from. And there was this great drive about putting in, hard work, and the only way
Why
you got anywhere was hard work.
why weren't you interested in that?
Because because I suppose I was generationally on the cusp, and
Mm,
I was more interested in not working for a large organization, but starting my own business, starting a smaller business. No, so slightly more entrepreneurial, but it wasn't for complete flexibility. It was because I think that it was very much, certainly during the 80s and going into the 90s, there was a great drift in the West about young entrepreneurs starting businesses,
right.
rapid growth, and that's
The
what I was
American
interested
dream.
in. Yeah, that's what I was interested in.
Well, what's fascinating to me is the the incentive. In my opinion, much of HR and talent is all about incentive. And if the incentive for the generation older than you was, well, if you work harder and you put in more hours or you put in the work, etc., you'll be able to do XYZ. The problem now is that even if you do those things that we used to do, like work hard, whatever that means to you, and you will become a manager or be more part of the business, just because you do that does not actually mean that that comes true, that you're able to hit your financial goals. And I think that's what we see from a Gen Z perspective, firsthand, but also secondhand when it comes to millennials. secondhand first, and then I think firsthand. Because again, Gen Z is the oldest cohort, like oldest end of the cohort is 28. I'm 26. So that's we're getting to that level of management, that first level of management, and we're not necessarily seeing the benefits of it, which is going back to an earlier conversation of why we're opting out of management positions. But I want to double click on the financial gap because this article actually brought in some data points, which is the first one being the median home price is $433,000 in New York or in the US. The needed income to afford that is around $166,000 per year. The median household income is half that, less than half that. Baby boomers could afford homes and cars on a $30,000 salary. And Gen Z can't afford a studio apartment despite having maybe multiple degrees and working 40 plus hours a week. Not to mention, for those of us who are in the workforce that are actually putting in the work, we're being told that we're exceeding expectations more often than not, and yet we're not reaping the benefits of that work. And we're also not seeing millennials reap much of the benefits either, or get that ownership that they're promised, et cetera, et cetera. And some of that is attributed to the fact that boomers aren't retiring or aren't retiring as quickly
Yeah.
as we want them to. So it's like it seems to me like there's a cascade of effects going on. But there's also these like financial constraints and factors that are really impacting that incentive. The incentive to work hard, to put more hours in, to, do the most, I guess, in a Gen Z way of saying it, that I think other generations are picking up on. And instead of really having the empathy to understand it, they're instead being judgmental. A lot of the times, not everyone, not making that case, but I will say I definitely do feel like the generational stereotypes are really harsh.
They probably, well, to an extent, they always have been.
Right.
Maybe not as harsh as it feels now, because there's something else that you've described that comes with it, which is a kind of a lack of access to opportunity, shall we say, in terms of building and
Yeah.
structuring a life around the kind of things that we spoke about in a previous episode to do with your home, family. It doesn't have to be. There are many other ways, establishing yourself in a business, establishing something. So it is harder. Having said that, there was a toll that was the people in the above me, the boomers, and earlier than the boomers, paid. In that, I talk about the first business I worked for was an accountancy firm, a smaller one.
Mhm.
Two of the senior partners of that business died from heart attacks at age 51 and
Wow.
55. One of them working in the office, and the other one had been working in the office and had just left. So there was an intense pressure on these people. And I think that generations since then have possibly they've seen an older generation. Obviously, in those days, we didn't know as much about diet, we didn't know as much about nutrition, about exercise, and all those things that we know now, and what was good for you and what wasn't. But that wasn't an uncommon kind of story. And I think that as you come down through generations, there is this kind of there is a belief in hard work, but it's come out in different ways. It's shown in different ways,
Yeah.
and I think that where personally that I think that where we're at now with say your generation is that it's not very easy to see what the path is to not stability, but that kind of reaching that plateau where you can either own your own home, or you have a status in life or work that's quite comfortable, where you're on top of what you do and you can build quite a nice lifestyle for yourself, is coming farther and farther away. And I appreciate that is very frustrating. But it's just almost another iteration of how it's developed over the last 60, 70, 80 years, I
Right.
think.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
And you've got technology, of course. I mean, everybody thinks this is something new. When I was at school, we had IT lessons very early, punching cards and stuff like that. But it's kind of, everybody thinks it's to do with these things and phones and stuff. But there were computers. When I was a kid, we were always told about computers. So it's kind
Yeah.
of okay. We didn't have digital technology then, but so I think that has also played quite a big part in this.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me, and something I've been talking about a lot lately, is it might be more simple than we are making it out to be, as far as how do you get to the place of having that stability and not necessarily a lifelong career, but more stability in your career. And in my opinion, it always comes back to supply and demand. What's in demand? Where's the supply? And how much supply is there? And right now, amongst Gen Zers, the most interesting, or the most, I guess the industries that people are flocking to the most right out of college, or have in the past 10 years, is finance, consulting, real estate. I think that's it. Those are some of the most competitive, not only the actual culture of work, but just to get an internship. Like, people are starting to recruit for those types of internships first semester of college, of your freshman college year. And to me, and then add on, like, you're getting a master's, you're getting a business degree, and 24%, I think, of Columbia or Harvard. There was like some article that came out a few days ago. 24% of some MBA graduating class is having a hard time finding jobs. That's a quarter. And so you have all this education, and yet you can't get a sexy job. In my opinion, we need to start telling people and educating people on the fact of, like, there's a supply and demand issue, and these other unsexy industries that are not tech, finance, consulting, real estate are actually the ones where the jobs are. And they're the ones that you want to explore because of the sheer fact of it has more stability, it has more opportunity, it has more career progression. These organizations are actually investing in young people, they're investing in upskilling, they're investing in the things that you want. And instead of having your head, turned and not looking at it for the mere sake of it's not cool or sexy, we need to start to pivot their head and to show them that it doesn't have to be sexy in order for it to be a great place to work. And it might not be sexy now, but it might be in, a few years.
Yeah.
And so, in my opinion, where the interesting work is, and where I'm starting to pivot in my business, is to help these organizations actually appeal to the next generation of talent and talk about the ways in which they can deliver from a career standpoint, from a experience standpoint, from a lifestyle perspective, because that's really what we're talking about here. So that's thanks for letting me rant. I guess that's why we
No,
have this podcast.
no. You rant away. I mean, it's there is still, I suppose, a desire for sexier industries. But if you look at, I mean, we've already said here, the population is aging, people are still working, There was an article in the Financial Times only a few weeks ago where they're interviewing all people in their 80s who are still working, pretty much full time in
Wild.
some cases, not because they've got no money, but because they enjoy it and they don't see why they should give up. And the thing is, we're living longer. We're living, in some cases, sicker for longer.
Mm.
And of course, where the desperate need is in terms of sectors is healthcare. And that will grow more and more because we're all living longer.
That's another one.
Uh,
Yeah.
but again, that's not what you would probably define as a sexy industry.
Yeah. I mean,
But
think
then
how
that
hard it is to recruit nurses right now.
well, that's it, and that then gets us into politics on both sides of the Atlantic about immigration and things. So I mean, that's a lot of healthcare roles are
Hmm.
filled by immigration.
Yeah.
Um, but there is kind of, when we're talking about sexy industries and way to build a career, quite a few of the jobs that need to be filled are in sectors where people wouldn't necessarily think of working, or don't feel attracted to.
Yep. That's very true. So let's figure out how we can change that. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've hit kind of a natural ending point. This
Yep.
conversation was really interesting. We talked about the ability for people to afford houses. We talked about work ethic. We talked about generational perspectives. We talked about Mervyn graduating and how different that was, and his father.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a first.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And here we are talking about turning heads and looking at some unsexy careers and jobs. If you want more of these X to Z conversations, please feel free to subscribe on the Purple Acorn channel on LinkedIn, or go to purpleacorn.io and join us every Wednesday. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, Mervyn.
It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to the next chat, Danielle.
Me too. All right. Bye.
Bye.